Welcome to our channel, Listen to My Story. Please like, share and subscribe.
This is Tina, and this is a story about me and my biological mother. My mother is sitting in the cafe of a garden center, staring at her cup of tea. I'm over the other side of the shop looking at some strawberry preserves. I want to attract her attention, but the word mom sticks in my throat. I use it so infrequently. Instead of calling out, I just walk over and show her the jam. Ever since I left home 15 years ago, the relationship between my mother and me has worsened. In hindsight, it was never very good to start with, but it's taken 15 years of counseling and soul searching to realize that. The fact of it is that my mother and I don't like each other much. We don't hate each other, we're just sort of indifferent. There, I've said it, indifferent. Saying it feels like committing some sort of crime. My mother and I live hundreds of miles apart, and in the case of most of my friends, this should mean that visiting home should be a time of joy and excitement. Instead, they are weekends of tense, polite conversation, both of us desperately searching for something in common to talk about. And that is usually what she's currently watching on television. As a 20-something woman, I'm constantly surrounded by reminders that my mom should be my best friend. Advertising aimed at my demographic features glamorous, youthful mothers going to the salons with their best friend daughters. Because it's all so alien to me, I tend to become a little bit fixated. I tend to look beyond the principal plot lines of films and become obsessed with the parts that involve a mother and a daughter for a large, loving family headed by a quirky matriarch. When the film Mamma Mia came out, I went to see it with a girlfriend for a bit of a laugh. It was mainly about love affairs between Meryl Streep and her exes. As I watched, I was as always bewildered by the apparently natural bond that mothers and daughters have on screen. Another film. It's complicated, again with Meryl Streep, has a plot that hinges on her post-divorce relationship with her ex-husband. But the highlights for me, the way her children clustered around her and the way she reacted when they all came back to visit. Though I know it's not just on screen. My friend Susie has the same exact sort of relationship with her mom. It baffles and fascinates me. They talk every single day, sometimes more often, and tell each other everything. I didn't have an unhappy upbringing. I wasn't a happy child, but that wasn't down to child abuse or neglect. I was well clothed, fed, and I even had ballet lessons. I went to university paid for by my parents, and I knew and I still know that there's always somewhere to stay if I need to. But my mother and I never had the sort of closeness I saw in my friends' relationships. They would go shopping or share secrets. They would tell their moms things about their lives. The one time I tried to ask my mother about her teenage years, she told me to mind my own business. And so I did. I grew up minding my own business, and she minded hers. I left home as soon as possible and met my now husband at university, and he quickly stepped into the role of best friend and emotional support giver. I made enduring friendships, most of which I believe to be unconditional. Most of my friends believe me to be a loving and caring individual, and I know I could turn to any one of them in an emergency, and them to me. Yet, I cannot remember the last time my mother and I hugged, even though I hug my friends all the time, and the very thought of it makes me cringe. My mother is the last person I go to in a crisis. She is certainly the last person to whom I would tell a secret or a problem. And if I'm honest, I don't need to anymore, as I have my own friends now. But my lack of a close friendship with her bothers other people a lot. When I say that I don't have a close relationship with her, they ask whether we fight a lot. But no, I don't recall ever having a fight with my mother. That would entail caring enough to bother. I used to go through phases of worrying about it and trying to repair the damage, but all the while I was aware that I was doing it for other people. I visit infrequently, but I visit. I do it not so I can see her, but if I'm honest, so her neighbors and family can see me visiting. A few years ago, before I realized I didn't care anymore, I called her up and asked whether we could sort it out. Her answer told me everything I needed to know. Sort what out? I stopped bothering from that moment on. Now my principal concern is explaining to people why I don't see her that often. And I feel guilty for not really having a good enough reason. My parents weren't divorced. My father died a few years ago. There has been no huge family dispute. There's no big skeleton in anyone's cupboard. Well, not mine anyway. I recently went to see a nurse for a routine appointment, and she asked a host of questions about my mother. Eventually, I had to confess that I didn't know half the answers. She asked whether I could find out. My heart sank as I imagined having to give away a detail of my life, such as why I was going to the nurse to my own mother. Mother's Day is a nightmare. Trying to find a card that doesn't say my mother is my best friend or the best mother in the world or my heroine is not easy, let me tell you. Others try to fix it for me. Why don't you book a spa weekend for your mom? The very thought of my mother agreeing to or enjoying something like that is just laughable. Or they ask, why don't you go for counseling? This would be all well and good if she would ever condone the idea, but it implies a relationship that needs to be mended. Why does it need to be fixed at all? Were my mother a woman I had met on a train and chatted to for half an hour, she would be one of the last people in the world I would want to talk to for a further half hour. If she wasn't my mother, she would be someone I groaned about having to spend any time with. I simply grew up and discovered that I didn't like my mother as a human being. She's not like me. She's self-obsessed, not interested in others, thoughtless, and incapable of genuine warmth. She has no concept of giving love to receive love, and has never asked me a single meaningful question about my life or career. Some people might feel that I have a duty as a daughter to be there for my mother, that it's down to me to repair our relationship. But because of the way she's raised me, I don't feel there is a relationship to repair. I wish my mother no harm, and if she were in trouble, I would help her like a shot. But I would also be there for any of my neighbors and the old man who swears at people from the bus stop across the road.
Our feelings are always hard to control. We are humans after all. Sometimes we do things we can't explain, just because we feel that way. I had a student named Daniel, a sweet and innocent child. I was prepared to do anything for him, but don't judge me just yet. First, let me tell you my story. My name is Jolene. I'm a 21-year-old math teacher at a primary school. I live with my sister and my mother. My house was next to the school where I work. I love teaching, and I like teaching the students in creative ways. They loved me, and I loved them. Daniel was a special student, though. Our story began at the start of the new year. It was the first day of school. I missed all my students over the summer break. I missed them so much that I stood by the door to welcome them back. Before I started my first lesson, Mr. Smith, the student affairs officer, knocked on the class door, with Daniel hiding behind his back. Mr. Smith greeted the class and asked them to greet Daniel, but Daniel was too shy and didn't move. So I went over to him to take him by the hand, but he pulled his hand away, which embarrassed Mr. Smith. I asked him to greet his classmates, so he went and he stood in front of the class and he said, "Hello, I am Daniel." Then he went and he sat at the very back of the class. He didn't talk much with the other kids. He didn't like to interact with anyone. Daniel always looked sad, and I thought to myself, he's only 8. What could possibly have made him that way? I tried to get close to him, but he resisted all my efforts. Sometimes he looked like he was hiding some big secret, and later on, I learned what it was. One night, when I was surfing the social media, I came across a horrible news story about a jealous husband killing his wife and another man right in front of his son. The child had been none other than my new student Daniel. Reading that sad story, I started understanding why Daniel was acting that way. I decided to try brightening his life a little. Every day, I would buy a small present and put it on his desk. At first, it had no effect, but slowly he came to love that. During break time, I would sit beside him and we would share food together. I would get him involved in class activities. On his birthday, I arranged a surprise party with his class, his grandmother, and myself. He was so happy that day. After the party, he hugged me and he told me that he loved me. I hugged him tightly. He was not just a student to me. I treated him like he was my own son. He told me that he wanted to call me mother, and that made me so happy. After his grandmother died, he came to live with me. We faced a lot of problems together, but I followed his success in life with pride. Daniel is all grown up now. He's graduating from the Faculty of Engineering. I am so proud of what he has made of himself.